So here in this part of the lab report, I'm asking you to check your statement or check your conclusion. And why do I say that? And why do I have this? It's because students often will contradict themselves. They'll collect data that shows that there's an obvious decrease in the relationship between two variables, and they'll talk about how an increase was shown. I'm not sure how that happens, but I just would like to make sure that you're clear about your reasoning, and I'm clear on my understanding of what your reasoning is. So I'd like you to go ahead and write out your conclusion, or and answer these questions. What is your conclusion? How did it tie into your hypothesis? Did your background align with your statement? You know, answer these questions. I didn't answer them here, but answer these questions in this space or an associated document if you need more room. So what did your background align with your statement? Did you do research on water and then talk about air? Make a statement about air? Did you do research about groundhogs and then start talking about hawks? Does your background align with what your statement is? Did you make a statement about the future or some kind of generalizable statement in the end? In other words, did you write a hypothesis that predicted something? Because the only thing we can test in science is the only way we can test things in science is to say this will happen if I do this, because the relationship between these two variables are such. The only way you can make those kinds of statements is if you can predict and then test that prediction. If the prediction's wrong, then your proposed relationship is wrong. If the prediction's right, then that supports that relationship. The evidence supports the explanation of that relationship. So what kind of future experiments or lines of questioning does your conclusion open up? So the conclusion that we came up with suggested that we needed to do more experimentation and extend the time of the experiment another couple days to see if indeed the line would plateau. We made a conclusion, we have evidence to support it, but we see that there is still room for improvement. So these are the kinds of things that you need to write in this space and/or an associated document if you need more room. So what is the evidence that supports this statement here that 21% oxygen, 79% other gases? First, the water level in the test tube went up, and because of all the all the previous videos and all the different pieces and parts that we discussed, you should understand what this means. The water level in the test tube went up. Therefore, I'm not going to get into it. You should be able to describe it at this point. There was rust inside the test tube in the steel wool, and in fact, if the steel wool were touching the water, that water was turned red or brownish red. The steel wool in the test tube rusted, so that means iron solid plus oxygen gas to lead iron oxide. The change in color of the steel wool was evidence, and so was the color of the water in some of the containers where the steel wool was touching the water. All right. So there was rust. The water level did go up, and our negative control did not change. The volume did not change in the negative control. These three pieces of evidence support the idea that, and of course, all the results from the graphs, right? So you could add more lines and more pieces to this puzzle. You can discuss how the volume of the test tube changed over time. You can talk about how much it changed over time. You can talk about the fact that the line was starting to flatten out. You can talk about how you calculated the volume change. All that you can talk about in this conclusion that would help support this idea that the oxygen in the atmosphere is around 21%, and the other gases make up about 79% of the concentration of the mixture of gases that we call the atmosphere. All right, that's it for the conclusion, and that's all the pieces of the experimental or the lab report.